思い出したくもない事件からもう2週間が経とうとしてる。キドハイド、私の体をこんなにしてもてあそんだ責任絶対に取らせてやるんだから。噂によれば小さな女の子といつも一緒だって言うし、きっとその子も弱みを握られてあんなことやこんなことを。キドハイド、なんてハレンチな男なの。鬼滅でフラッチ、女の敵。私の意志は天の意志。絶対に許さない。どこに隠れようと必ず見つけ出してこの手で成敗してやるって。なんかこれじゃまるで私があいつを追いかけてるみたい。違う。私は土下座させて頭踏みつけて謝らせたいだけ。
So, the new fighting game that's coming out on PlayStation 4 in early February is under Night In-Birth Exe latest. It's been brought to us by PQube and was developed by French Bread, which is a very well regarded indie developer out of Japan that specialises in 2D fighting games. I thought I'd pull together a video showing some of the new characters, or all 4 of the new characters, for people who had played previous games in the series. And for those who haven't, I thought I'd give you some hands-on impressions from somebody who hasn't actually played these games too much. I played the last one briefly for a review. I didn't get too into it. I think I was busy at the time. So this is all fairly new to me. I apologise for veterans of the series. You're going to see an awful lot of button mashing as I learn my way around this game. This is what you're seeing in front of you is the first hour or so of play. I've got a long way to go to learn it. But one of the things I actually found really appealing about this game is that it is, as far as 2D fighting games go, it's quite accessible and it doesn't take you long to start doing some attacks and moves that are pretty visually impressive, and you start to feel pretty good about yourself as you're playing. So yeah, I had a go with most of the characters now. I've got some favourites, and you'll see my favourite when I give the survival mode a crack a bit later on. Anybody who knows me will probably not be surprised by who my favourite is. But yeah, it's they're all pretty good. I think, as far as I can tell from this very early stage and my inexperience with this series, I think the characters, the fighting is pretty well balanced. I think people will find their own favourite characters. Each one has a very distinct style, but no one seems to have an outrageous advantage over anybody else. And you'd kind of expect that, I guess, from a developer like French Bread, who has so much experience in making these games. As you can see, the combat is quite fluid, it's quite fast. If you are going to button mash, there's going to be an awful lot of action going on. I can imagine that somebody who's experienced will have counters to the button mashing. I don't by any means think that this is a game for beginners. You can get into it quite easily, but it's one of those games that's going to take quite a bit to master. And fair enough, that's what fighting game fans want, especially 2D fans, fighting game fans. I spent a lot of time myself getting quite good at the BlazBlue games because I found those quite engaging and interesting, and I'm glad that there was that kind of level of complexity there, so I could get into it. One of the things that is exciting about this one, I haven't got too far into it just yet, but there is a full story mode. The previous one, I think one of the reasons that I didn't get too into it was that there was no story mode, so I didn't feel like there was much of a context to what was going on with the characters and so on. That's been remedied with this one. It does have a full visual novel style narrative, a little bit like in the BlazBlue games. So that's going to be a major part of my review when I get around to doing that in early February, and look forward to that, I guess. I can't really talk about it much now because I've been sworn to secrecy and they obviously don't want me to spoil anything that goes on in there. But from the very short time that I've had with it, I found it quite appealing. I found it quite interesting, and I think that it adds what this game needed to take it from that really indie kind of small scale production to something that's starting to have legs as a 2D fighter compared to the likes of BlazBlue and Guilty Gear. This one's character roster is not as big as those two, but definitely French Blood is onto a good thing with what they've got as a basis, and they just keep adding to it with one game to the next. So for fans of Under Night, or for people who want to get into it for the first time, this is probably the place to start, because I can only imagine that the developer will want to spin this out into a franchise and continue to develop it. So you might as well get in, you know, at the roots of it and enjoy it, I guess. So here we go. Here we are. Here I am about to give the survival mode a go. I must admit, when I play fighting games, when I'm not playing them for the story, I'm generally playing the survival mode because it just appeals to me, I guess. Trying to beat your last best score and survive that one battle longer is a challenge that I find quite appealing. So I don't get too far in this one. 5 battles, I'll give you a spoiler to my efforts now. I get through 5 battles, and yeah, it wasn't my greatest fighting game performance. Again, I apologise to fans of Under Night who probably feel like I am absolutely ruining their favourite game right now by being so amateurish at it, but I swear I really am enjoying my time with it, and it's probably something that I will spend a bit of time this time getting the hang of and learning some of the nuances and complexities for it. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this is my favourite character, I think, Nanase, I guess that's how you pronounce it, based on how Japanese names work. And she's cool. She's obviously Twin Tails, and as a fan of Hatsune Miku and the like, Twin Tails is always where I gravitate towards with fighting games. But she seems to have that mix of reach with that sword of hers, and she hits fairly hard, but at the same time she's not, you know, laboriously slow. So that's the kind of middle ground I generally like in my fighting games. I like one of those characters that doesn't have to get super close to do any damage, and doesn't have to take, you know, 1,000 hits to slowly, you know, etch away the opponent's health. I like a character that can, you know, can throw a sword around and do some damage, but doesn't need to deal with a half-hour long cycle to get back in position for the next swing, as the heavier fighting game characters tend to. One of the things I think you'll notice, I did mention before that the animation's very slick and it's very gorgeous. Short of Blaze Blue and Guilty Gear, you know, this is up there. The team at French Bread, for an independent developer, is doing a really good job of really pushing the boundaries of what you could expect from an indie 2D fighter. And the animation, you certainly see that in full flight. Everything's very smooth and slick, and there's nothing that really seems to be missing. Nothing unexpected's thrown at you, which can happen with some of the cheaper fighting games out there. The other thing that's really noticeable about this one is the backgrounds. Again, they're not quite up to the standard of Blaze Blue and Guilty Gear. They're just not quite there, but again, this is a game that was developed on a fraction of the budget by a very small team, and they've done a good job in really setting the scene with some very nice level of detail and nice variety of the backgrounds. I think that's probably the most noticeable thing about it, is the variety is really there. So yeah, visually it's quite appealing. The music is quite generic, but not many fighting games have great music. And the characters are nice and different, and have different personality and different fighting styles. So, like I said before, everybody's going to have a favourite one. In terms of gameplay modes, there's everything that you'd expect. You see me here playing through the survival mode. There's the arcade mode, which is, you know, a quick-fire series of opponents to beat with a very brief summary of some of the major plot points along the way. There's the story mode, which I mentioned before, which is new and exciting and something I'm really looking forward to digging into. There's obviously online play, which is very important for this kind of game and for this kind of fan base. And traditionally it's been quite a strong online infrastructure that they use. There's a good training mode, which I haven't shown here, but it's something that the developers worked really hard at to again make the game more accessible for people, and I think it's worked. It is an accessible fighting game as a result, and that training mode will be something that I think newcomers will want to spend a fair bit of time in. And there's a couple of other, you know, less important modes, I guess. The one thing that seems to be a little bit short on in the game so far is the amount of unlockables and stuff. I know unlockables aren't a big deal in fighting games anymore, but as you fight, you earn points, which you can use to buy pictures, artwork from the game, and enjoy that. And I'll put a bit of artwork at the end of this clip because it's a good one. It's of Nanase, of course. And there's not that much. I mean, from an hour's of play, I've already unlocked a whole bunch of art. There doesn't seem to be that much more to unlock, so I'm probably going to have everything unlocked within a couple of hours, which, if you're going to put unlocks in there, that seems a bit, thin, and I'm not sure what else I can use those points for at this stage. But, that's a minor complaint, and this is certainly not a full review. As you can see from my fighting, I've got a long way to go before I'm ready to actually review this thing. Luckily, I've got about a month to play it before the review will be out, but certainly stay tuned for it, because this is a game I'm really enjoying so far. So thanks very much for watching the video. Apologies one more time to fans of the series, and I promise with my review video I'll be much better.